Welcome to the 2021 Fanfare Launch into Cyberspace. Normally, you'd be visiting the High School of Art and Design's gymnasium, cafeteria, and other spaces around the building to interact and learn about the incredible creations of our young professionals, other creators and innovators in the community. You'd be seeing portfolio reviews. You would be involved in special seminars and workshops. You'd be seeing exciting contests and drawathons. Again, that would have been during a normal school year. The incredible challenges of the pandemic have forced our amazing PTA to take Fanfare and bring it online. So this is our first and hopefully only virtual Fanfare event. And with that said, we still have the vast majority of incredible experiences and learning opportunities for you to be a part of. We're incredibly proud of what our PTA and larger school community have put together and can't wait for you to join us throughout today and the next few days as each one offers unique and special events. Be safe, be well, most importantly, enjoy yourselves and be part of our community.
Hey guys, how great has this been so far? I'm having a blast. I hope you are too. Please do not forget to donate. Go to fanfarenyc.com or text FFNYC to 44-321. And for our next segment, it's called The Lens as a Pen. Please join photographers Jamel Shabazz and Michael Young as they discuss their careers in documenting the human condition. Please do not miss the chance to hear these stories because they're incredible. The photos are amazing, and Giovanna is going to lead the way. So please take the first question.
I would like to ask both of you how you've gotten into photographing and how you chose which path you want to go to, whether it being landscape or portrait. So it's open.
Can I take that, Mike? So, all right. So, how I got into photography was like, I'm not in it as long as my brother Jamel. I started like really getting serious about it in about 2011. Um, and I started with just taking kind of pictures of everything because I kind of love photography as a whole. Like some of my background is that I was a performing arts major when I was in high school, and so I've always had this thing with film. I've always loved movies, and when I was young, um, there was a period where we had a color TV, but it broke, so we didn't have a TV for a while. And then finally, my aunt broke down and bought us a black and white set. So I saw a lot of movies that were even in color, but everything was always black and white to me. So I didn't realize that was imprinting on me. So fast forward into where I am now, I said about like I said around 2009, I got my first DSLR camera. I had an old film camera that I used many years ago, but I wasn't like I say that I wasn't ready at that time to really embrace photography. But by 2009, I was like I was really open, and once I started taking pictures, it never stopped. Like a friend of mine passed away, and his wife was trying to sell his camera gear, and so I was going to sell it for him, but I ended up buying it, and I just started taking pictures. And I'm more or less self-taught. I kind of was using Flickr and YouTube has a means of like learning. And then my wife saw my passion for it, and so she got me a 1 day course for manual photography. And once that happened, I took the flash off of the top of the camera and I started moving the light around. And after that, it kind of opened up my whole world to doing landscape photography, which I like to call natural light photography or God's light, and then taking the light off of the camera and doing flash photography. So that's like the portrait side of the work that I do. So I'll do like some fashion work or just regular like portraiture work. But that's kind of like how I got started.
Okay.
And I'd just like to first say that I'm very grateful for this opportunity to be in conversation with you. I'd like to extend my thanks to Barbara Gordon, who reached out to me to participate in this conversation, along with the PTA and the students and staff at Fanfare. So thank you so much for providing this opportunity for me to speak to my wonderful brother, whose work inspires me so much today. But my beginning started in the 1960s. And if we could bring up the first slide, I would really appreciate that, because that's really the foundation that I stand on right now. It was through my father being a photographer and having a house full of books that I was introduced to the visual language of photography during this particular time in America. I'm a child of the 1960s, and coming of age, we had a number of things going on both in the country and around the world that really caught my curiosity as a young child. And it was the language of photography that drew me in. And when you look at Life magazine at that time was almost equivalent to what the internet is today, because in that publication, Life magazine, it gave you a gauge into what was going on in America and around the world. And we had a subscription to it. So through that publication, I was introduced to a world outside of my community and the language of photography. So this is a remix photograph that I took in the 1990s of two publications that formed my appreciation of photography in the street. But you have two situations going on. You have a young man, Joe Bass, shot in the street of Newark, New Jersey back then. And then you have a war going on in Vietnam. So during the 1960s, we were dealing with the civil rights movement. We were dealing with the war in Vietnam. And it was on the television screen almost every day, in addition to the various publications. So as a young child, I was instantly drawn towards wanting to know more about what's happening. So it's the language of photography that really informed me to better understand what was going on, unbeknownst to my parents. I went to private school, and they never addressed the issue of Vietnam nor civil rights in America. So what I would do, I would leave school and I would go to the library and look at as many publications as I could to learn about this wonderful language of photography. So during this time, I'm about 8, 9 years old. We can go to the next slide. I just started to pick up as many books as I can, because you have a war going on in Vietnam, you have protests going on around the country, and no one is telling me anything. So at that point, I developed an appreciation for photography, and it wouldn't be until maybe many years later in which I would pick up my very first camera. And how that came about is very interesting too, because I often speak about this local gang that we had in our community. And my close friend had a cousin that belonged to this particular gang, and he was like their photographer. And I went to his house one day with him, and I was amazed with these beautiful portraits that he had of this gang. And unlike the gangs that we envision of wearing certain colors, these guys were very dapper and debonair. They were a cross between African Americans and Caribbeans, and they had a style about themselves. And I used to look at these beautiful photographs that he had, well composed, well positioned in these photo albums. And I said to myself, I want to be a photographer and take pictures like that. And reason being, because a lot of the images reminded me of my peers. So unlike the war photography images and the documentary images, now I'm looking at photographs that I can identify with more so, and I had the great ability to capture. So I went back home and I snatched at my mother's Instamatic camera. They were very popular back in the days in the household. A Kodak Instamatic camera was a point and shoot, and they always had extra cameras laying around the house. And I took it to my junior high school and started photographing my peers. Back in that day and time, you would take pictures and go to the local drugstore and get them processed. And it was always this treat now, because it's like once I picked up the camera, it's like a power came over me. And now I was able to see beyond the two eyes. I was able to see through my third eye. I was able to see beauty within people, and I developed a whole new appreciation for life. Because mind you, now at that time, I had struggled speaking. I could not get words out. I had like a slight stuttering problem. I can't really say stuttering, but I had difficulty pronouncing words. But it seems like once I picked up the camera, I was given a purpose in life. Now I have a new voice and vision, and I started photographing my peers first at junior high school. Now I would get the pictures processed, I would share them with them, and now I was given a purpose in life. So that's my really first stages of photography, and I immediately fell in love with it when I was 15, and it wasn't until I came home from the military that I took it to a whole nother level of appreciation and importance.
I think it's so interesting to hear both of you and the differences of how you've gotten into it, because then it just shows how not everyone that goes into photography has like the same background or has the same path or has the
Right.
same vision of what they want to photograph or how
Right.
they want to photograph it. So I think it's so interesting that both of you photograph different things and in different aspects and have like different mindsets of when you do it, which a lot of people don't have when they do like other work. They always try to find to connect it to someone else, or they see it, someone better's work, and then they're like, oh, I should probably be doing that. So I think it's so interesting that both of you just do you.
Yeah, I like to speak to that too. If you could pull up the slide that says personal, for me. One of the things that really resonated with what you just said, Giovanni, is a lot of times I think artists as a whole, they struggle. To be an artist is to be a creator, but it also opens us up to feeling inadequate and like we don't measure up. And so one of the things that really spoke to me early, well, it wasn't very early in my photography journey, but one of the things that always stuck out to me was that, you know, there's no other person in the world like Giovanni, and no one can see the world the way Giovanni sees the world. No one can do what Jamel does the way Jamel does it, the way he captures, the way he connects. It can't be replicated. They'll have other people that will come and will probably, be able to benefit from what he has laid down in terms of a foundation, but they'll be able to take it and then they're going to run with it with their DNA and put their DNA stamp on it. So all of us are created by a creator who makes us very unique, and we never have to worry about being a carbon copy. We're an original, and so that originality is what stamps and imprints itself on the work that we produce and how we connect with other people. So just like you said, do you when you do photography. Don't worry about what anybody else is doing or try to be in competition with them. The only person you should ever be in competition is with yourself in terms of personal growth. And you should be growing as an artist. And that is kind of what I strive to do. When I started shooting, I struggled in those areas. But what I tried to do was, there was a photographer who I used to listen to by the name of Matthew Jordan Smith. And he said something very profound to me that resonated with me. And it was, if you photograph what you love, you'll always find an audience. So even though I wasn't necessarily looking for an audience, I was just trying to get this creative thing that God put in me out. Like somehow I needed to get it out. I couldn't understand like visually what was happening to me when I was younger, with this love of cinema. But when I started taking pictures and putting them in black and white, it all started to make sense. Oh, that's what was happening with me when I was younger. And now I'm able to express it. If you can move on to the next slide. And even though I even started to dive into like how Jamel would look at pictures of people to learn how to pose them, right? To make them feel comfortable. When I knew that I wanted to do portrait work, I started doing self-portrait work. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to put the camera on myself so that I could see what ways I would be able to remedy that with other people when I knew that how uncomfortable it was for me. And then in experimenting with that, it ended up where I started just doing like these self-portraits. Can you go to the next slide? But it was always this obsession for me with shadow and light. I'm just obsessed with it, and it kind of like drives everything. It's like a driving force behind pretty much most of my photography work. And my wife is my muse. She's the person that I had access to again going back to what Jamel was sharing with you in terms of photographing the people that you have access to. And it will make you comfortable with approaching other people and posing them and positioning them and paying attention to their body language. She was very instrumental in me being able to do that. She's still the easiest person to work with. Everyone else is harder, but yeah, but again, it was practicing with her and perfecting like a style and just the way I kind of like see things and being able to project it on her has always been a thrill. Can you go to the next one more slide? And again, it's always for me, it's always about playing around with light. And this was actually taken in a parking garage. We were going on a date to the movies, and she I saw this like scene, and I said, hey, can you just stand there? And she was starting to get impatient because we were going to be late for the movie. but this ended up being the end result. When she saw the picture, she was like, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. And it's those kind of reactions that really let you know you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. So thanks a lot for the slides, guys.
I would like to say I find it so interesting, like the backstory behind images, and like how you said she was impatient and you were going somewhere, but you still took the photo and it looked like that. Like that's interesting because taking a photo is just like taking a photo, but the process to lead up to taking it is so interesting. It's the conversation that you have with the person that you're photographing,
Right.
and your surroundings, and how you want to say, oh, stand here, or the light looks good here. Like all the words that are being exchanged is like how it leads up to being some great image. So I think
Right.
that's so cool and so interesting to find out what it's like behind.
Yeah, one of the things too is to and I know Jamel can chime in on this as well. It's always, as a photographer and as a person who's documenting things, pay attention, be open, and pay attention to your surroundings, everything that's going on around you, especially like even in some of the neighborhoods, Jamel, that you've had to photograph in. You had to pay attention to body language, to what was happening, what was playing out in the street at that time. Because that was a nice picture of my wife in a very safe setting. But I've been some places where it's not so safe. But you still want to be able to be a disarming presence, and you want to be able to make people feel comfortable even when you're not necessarily comfortable.
And for me, it's like, I put a lot of thought into what I do. If I'm going out tomorrow, it's a whole lot of preparation that comes before I even step out my door.
Right.
I want to know the weather. I want to know the light conditions.
Right.
I want to have a particular theme in mind in which I'm going to focus on. I'm going to make sure I'm physically fit, give me a good solid workout. I want to know where the bathrooms are at. I mean, it's a whole before I even step outside my door. Nobody realized that. And I did that for many, many years. I had to stretch and be in the right mindset. I had to wear the right clothes, the right colors, the impact certain people. And I had it mapped out before I even stepped out. And then when I went out, I was good. I checked all my equipment, made sure my batteries were charged, and I had themes in mind. One of the greatest gifts that my father gave me early on was have themes. So I had themes like fathers and sons, mothers and daughters, twins, love, hats, trains. So when I stepped out, everything was there for me, and I call it seeing with the third eye, because I could be with someone and they would, who might even have a camera, and they will walk past something I saw. I'm always observing, constantly looking. Even if I'm standing on the corner, I'm doing what I call a 360. I'm looking at everything around me. I might be somebody say, yo, hold on for a second. I gotta go get that picture. And I'm gonna go and get that shot, that image, because I'm constantly observing everywhere I go. In addition to the fact that my camera's always with me and it's always set. My father taught me early on, take it out of the case, take the cap off. So that, so I don't have to fumble. Now I see what I want to get, and I'm going to get it. So we can go to 2 slides over the first image, aside from the book. I would appreciate that. Of the, I believe the kid flipping on the mattress.
Yeah.
But I'll say this here: some of my most iconic photographs pretty much came from me having my camera out and always set. And as the light changes, I'm setting my aperture for every situation. If I'm above ground, I decide to go on the train. I'm changing my aperture. Back in the old days, I might even take out the color 100 film and slide in 400 film. Now, this is a very interesting photograph here. This is considered one of my most iconic photographs. And this is when I went away from portraits, and I was looking more to catch what we would call decisive moments. And I'm walking in the neighborhood of Brownsville, and I see these kids practicing on this old beat up mattress. And I immediately went back to my youth and how I used to do this here. So I anticipated certain things that were going to happen. So I had my camera set, and I just waited, and I took 2 frames. I was able to get this photograph right here. What makes me feel good about this particular shot more than any one of my photographs, when I went home and showed my father the print, he was so happy because he realized he was paying attention to detail. But at that time, it wasn't about point and shoot. We had to understand the science of speed and light, because that's what created this image. If your lighting was off, the picture would be either too light or too dark. If your speed was off, it would be a blur. So at this point, I took my time. I looked at the lighting situation. I made sure that my shutter was set right. I made sure that my aperture setting was right, and I slowly squeezed it. And unlike today, where you got digital photography, you could look at the back and see what you got. It had to all be within inside your mind. You know what I mean? There was no Photoshop. I just shot it as it is. And I might have been about 21, 22 years old at this time, trying to figure out my path. And it was going to be one of my most important photographs here. We can go to another frame.
That shot is amazing. It always blows me away every time I see it.
I call it flying high. And what I see in this image also are young children that have the ability to be anything they wanted in life. And oftentimes we don't see that greatness within inside them. And with the second frame of the man swinging the dog, it's a very interesting shot, because that goes back to my father's teaching also. Can we go to the photograph of the man swinging the dog? This particular photograph is so profound on so many different levels for me, because on this particular day, it was raining. It was a slight drizzle. And most photographers would put the cameras away. But going back to the instructions of my father was, despite the rain, my camera was still out. And I happened to see this man playing around with his dog, and I anticipated something was going to happen. I raised my camera, and I got 3 frames. I was able to capture that shot. And I was very young at that time, trying to understand the science of photography. So again, that's called a decisive moment, and that goes against the grain of what I normally do. Can you pull up another frame, please, of the 3 girls posing? Posing is a very important element of the creative process as well, too, because oftentimes you get people who might agree to have the image taken, but they don't know what to do. So as a creative now, you have to come up with poses to make it fun. And that was one of the main parts about it. The posing allowed me to make it fun and have it interactive at the same time. And this is a prime example of this right here. I'm downtown Brooklyn in front of the Albee Square Mall, where it's very crowded. There's a lot of people there. So what I wanted to do was take them around the distraction. And I always like to use walls as my backdrops. And I saw this idea of creating this pose where, I told 2 to go on top and 1 to come low and show that sisterhood by holding hands. So that's all a part of the creative process right now, making it fun and something they can identify with. What's interesting about it, I didn't know these girls, so I had to convince them that my intentions were sincere, and at the same time, I wanted to make it fun. And we can go to one more picture of the 2 guys posing.
Oh, yeah.
And this is another.
That is dope.
This is on Century Avenue. It's packed on the street. And, when I deal with crowds, I have to take people away from the crowded area and isolate them in. And this is the backdrop of a church, which has served as the backdrop to so many of my photographs from Flatbush. It's the perfect raw. I love the whole look and feel of it. And I had these guys, and they were down to be photographed, and I didn't have to say much. They just created this.
It was ready.
And that made it fun. And what happens too, when other people are watching this, now we have like the battle of the poses going on. So early on, when I was shooting in Brooklyn, I would have people lined up and we would see who could do the best poses. And again, that made it fun. So I say that 50% of my photography is candid moments, and there's another side that is portraits. Of course, when you confront people, and that's another aspect of what I do, it's a conversation. I just couldn't take a picture of people doing this right here. We had to have conversation. I had to introduce myself to them and give them a sense of who I was. And I always made it a point afterwards when I would get the photographs processed, I would get them copies of the images. So posing is a very important creative side of what I did back then. My style is very different now, but that was something that I really enjoyed during those days, just to interact with a lot of the subjects in which I photographed.
I think it's just so interesting that people used to pose like this, and then now it's kind of, you sort of have to direct them how to pose. But back then, I mean, you guys know better than I do. You could just ask them to, oh, I'm going to take your picture, and then they'll just do what the two guys did in your photo, Jamel, and they'll just go at it. And I think that's so interesting that it's definitely changed from how people pose in photos and how you have to direct them how to pose in photos.
Yeah, this is actually a perfect segue into, if you can pull up the slide for me that says portraits. And this is actually along the same lines in terms of what Jamel was just talking about, speaking to people. But now, like, I look at Jamel's images, and I remember even when I was a teenager back then, the first go-to for us was like, we always tried to, what we call finesse, how we were looking. We wanted to be like cool, or we wanted to be hard, and you just don't have that nowadays. You do really have to direct. And it is important for those of us who are photographers to try to position people as best we can. This particular image was one of those images that, like Jamel, I saw these two standing on Third Avenue. They were standing by a jewelry store. So it was like right around twilight. The sun was going down. So it was like I was paying attention to the light. But I always love that light that's coming out the store, because it's like it's a nice quality of light. But they were standing there, and I said, "Oh my God, this is his father," and he had his daughter up on his shoulders. And the first thing that it did was it reminded me of when my daughter was young, and how much she's 20 now, so I can't just like pick her up and embrace her the same way that I used to when she was small. But I remember when I used to just pick her up and hold her and carry her around and dance with her. And when I saw them together, that was the first thing that came to mind. The second thing that came to mind was, here it is, like 2019, and fathers have had a bad rap in terms of not being there for their children, not being the providers that they need to be. And I went up and I asked the brother. I was like, I'm a street photographer. I shoot a lot in the Bronx, and I really would love to take a picture of you and your daughter. He looked at me like, like, what's this, very skeptical, which I could completely understand. But the goal was to try to disarm and make him feel comfortable about the idea of being photographed. And I explained to him what I saw and how it made me feel seeing his interaction with his daughter. And I loved the resemblance that you could clearly see that was his child, because she looked like a little version of him, just a little girl. When I told him what I was doing, I saw the hostility fall away from his face, and then all of a sudden it was just like this like real mellow look. Now he asked me like, well, what should I do? I said just you know what, you already are doing it. Because one of the things with me is that since now it's more difficult to approach people and to pose them, he seemed to be like already kind of in that moment. And one of the things that I know I love when I see people in the street, I shoot a lot of candid shots. So it's sometimes I don't want to disturb the scene because I like the form of a person's body in that moment. But with him, he got a little uncomfortable once I held the camera, but I told him just relax and just look to the side. And this ended up being the result of the image. When he saw the image, he was just blown away by it. And his reaction was, again, another testament to, man, I'm doing God's work. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. If you could go to the next slide. So the next slide is another similar story. This is Daniel, and Daniel is a bodybuilder. Sometimes he works in the gym, but a lot of times you see him out working in the street, mostly in Harlem. But for some reason, Daniel was up here in the Bronx over on 3rd Avenue. And he was doing his workout thing, and I actually had walked past him, but something in my head said, go back and ask him for a photograph. Well, I went back and I asked him for a photograph. You know what he said? He said, nah, man, nah. He said, I'm tired of people taking my pictures and exploiting me and me never really getting any kind of credit or anything for it. I see, and he said, the only thing that I admire about you is the fact that you came back and you actually spoke to me, because most people would just hold up a camera and just put it in my face and then walk off, and it would leave me feeling like I had been used. And I told him, yo, dude, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you in any way, shape, or form, but it was just something about you. And I had actually walked past you. And he said, I noticed that. I saw that you was looking at me, you walked past me, and then you came back. And he said, because you approached me the way you approached me, go ahead, take my picture. So I took a picture of him, and he's a bodybuilder. So the first pose that I took, he was just, standing up and he was doing like a little pose. And I was like, that's cool. But it was something about that scar on his face that resonated with me, that this brother had been through a lot in his life, that he's experienced some trauma. And I had him turn to the side and look, and I snapped this shot off. And when he saw that shot, he said, most of the time I do everything that I can do to kind of hide that scar. He said, but I never seen somebody make my scar actually look beautiful. And so right there we connected, and he was so happy that he had allowed me to take the picture. I'm still trying to get the picture to him, because we connected that day, and he saw the picture, so he wants a copy of the picture. I got a copy of the picture sitting right here waiting for him. So Daniel, if you're out there, I got your picture. But if you can go to the next slide. I was on a photo walk in the Bronx again, so because that's where I am, that's where I'm based, and this was a photo walk with the New York Times, and my brother Edgar Santana, he and I were together. We were conversating when this elderly gentleman who was well dressed just rolled up on us, and he stopped, and he spoke Spanish. I don't speak Spanish, at least not fluently. I could say a couple of words, but Edgar talked to him and spoke to him and told him, oh man, we would like to take a picture. So Edgar took a picture of him, and then I took a picture of him. When I took this picture of him, Edgar said that he said to me that he was 87. He was 87 years old, and I was like, well, God bless you, brother. You're 87, but you dressed to the nines. You look good, and then he went on his way. But this became the picture I called. He told me he was 87. And when I showed him the picture, he really appreciated the image. He loved the image. But it's always about trying to make that connection with people. When you can talk to them, it's good to go up and talk to them and put them at ease and give them try to make them feel comfortable that you want to take their picture, and then showing them the picture or printing the picture out and giving it to them. I don't have the other image up, but there was another image that I took of someone. When I gave it to them, they broke down in tears. And again, it was another one of those instances where it was like God just telling me through that experience, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. This is the purpose that he gave me. To be able to connect with people on an emotional level and put them in a certain type of mood just with your imagery, that's a gift. That's a gift, and it's a gift to be able to do it, and it's a gift to be able to give to someone else.
And that says so beautiful, brother, because I look at it in a similar way. I look at the camera as a compass. It has guided me on this path to meet people I feel I'm supposed to meet. And whatever reason, it's nothing is coincidence. I feel I'm supposed to meet you. And by me freezing this moment in time, we could revisit it later on. I don't know why we met. It may not make sense now, but it makes sense later on. And I've had situations where people after 30, 40 years have reached out to me. And they bring in this full circle why we met on this path of life. And it amazes me the amount of people. I might have a mother and son. And then the son reached out to me and said that you have a picture of my mother. She died last week. You know what I mean? And I have no photographs of her. So now it's all coming to play why things happen. I photographed individuals that passed away shortly afterwards. And now that memory is for their children to have. So I look at everything happens for a reason. And again, the camera has guided me on the path to meet everybody I was supposed to meet and photograph for whatever reason. And each day I'm learning more and more, why these encounters have happened. So having conversations are very important. My practice is really about engagement. I want to know who you are, where you're from, what are you about, if the opportunity presents itself. And friendships have been established behind that. And that's what it's really about with me. It's trying to understand why we met more so than the photograph. The photograph is secondary. I want to know why we met. What caused our paths to meet at this particular juncture in our lives. And and a lot of times I find answers to it. If I'm allowed to, can you put up the context sheet, please, to give you an example of a basic journey, the black and white context sheet. This particular sheet, like so many of my other context sheets, represents my journey, a days in the life of a photographer. And the context sheet versus the JPEG allows you to see the movement as a photographer, what you documented, the whole process, the composition, the shifts. So if you have the context sheet available, tech person.
Yeah. We had a question in the chat that said, I think it's directed towards Michael. Do you have them sign the photos when they're released, when you take photos of people that you just come across?
If it's a portrait that I've taken where I've connected with the person, then I'll reach out to them if I need to get a release for it.
And it's gray areas sometimes too, because what I found early on, when you take photographs and you ask for them to sign a release, now people get very suspicious. Now they feel you can do something with the photograph. That's why for me, it's about building trust. I always carried a business card with me. I made sure that you got a copy of it. I stressed upon most people I photographed that this is going to go in the archives. I'm going to do all I can in my power to make sure that your legacy is preserved. So it's about that trust versus the model release. Because once you pull out a model release and you want people to sign, they said, that's why I don't want to take a picture. They were fine until you talked about signing something.
Right.
That it's a form of manipulation. So I find it's just about building that trust. But this go ahead, brother. I'm sorry.
No. I was gonna echo what you were saying. It's really more about building the trust and telling them, and being like forthright with them in terms of what you plan on using it for. But back to you, brother. I want to hear about this contact sheet.
One of the things my father taught me too was to do contact sheets so you could look at your mistakes. In the beginning, I wasn't really open to do that because I wanted prints. But that process allowed me to look at the context sheets, make the corrections, understand the light, the composition, and at the same time, I started to print my own work. So this is one of my original context sheets from like 1982, and it just shows you my path of traveling. Oftentimes, I didn't have a lot of money, so I had to make sure that every shot count. I could not afford to make mistakes, and very rarely would I take 2 frames. So this is one of them rare shots that I have. If it's a subject that I think is a really good subject, like the young man on the train, I got him inside the train door, then I got him in between cars. And it just shows you my process from seeing a sunrise, seeing a young girl in the street corner. I'm looking at a little bit everything. Everything is pretty much uniquely different. Nothing is the same. There's documentary work, there's portraits, there's abstracts, there's a police officer. This is pretty much a typical day in my life. Shooting above ground and below ground. So when I look at this context sheet, it just takes me back to my actual thought process, the different things I was seeing. So it's almost like it becomes a part of a visual diary of the people I met throughout my life in just one day's work. And if you go to the next frame of the two guys on the bus looking at the book, this is very important to me too. I always carried a portfolio around with me. So it was about engagement. These are two guys I happen to know, and I'm sharing my journey with them. I want them to see what I've seen. And I just caught them in a moment of amazement when they're looking at my portfolio. You know, I'm on the bus, the lighting was good, it's a rainy day, and this is what I was really about. It just wasn't about capturing the moment. It was about building relationships with everyone in which I photographed. And I was trying at the same time too to encourage young men to pick up the camera and document their lives. So by showing them my work, you know, they had a chance to see the beauty of photography. And that was very important to me because I grew up during a time period, unlike today, that we were dealing with a crack epidemic and an AIDS epidemic. And a lot of people were dying. And I felt I had to be a voice to try to guide as many young people as I could. During this time period, I had just returned home from the military and I came home to a war zone. So I needed a platform to engage people. And photography gave me, in a sense, that platform to have conversations, not only to document, but to engage as many people as I could about what's going on. We celebrate the 50th anniversary of that iconic album by Marvin Gaye, What's Going On. That album is the soundtrack of my life and my journey. It's what I felt inside. It's a song called What's Happening, Brother. And it's pretty much about me coming back to America and I want to know what's going on. So that's pretty much how I was. I was away for 3 years overseas in Europe. And I came home to a changing environment, and my camera guided me to meet people to get a feeling of what was going on, and at the same time to lend my voice to try to guide people on a better path. And we can go to the next frame. It could be any photograph. So the book Black in America Informed Me. You know, that's one book I can say that became the cornerstone to my photography practices. My father had a signed copy of this particular book on our coffee table. It was by a white photographer who documented Black life in America. And this one photography book spoke to me personally. It's like it explained to me the trials and tribulations I would endure and the different things I would encounter as I grew up into manhood. I never met the author of the book, but I developed a great relationship with his wife, who actually gave me just recently a photograph that really inspired me early on, called We Must Have Justice. So we developed a great friendship. And I have an original signed print that was in the actual book. And it brought everything full circle in terms of why we met on the path. Here, 50 years later, I'm meeting a woman whose husband's book inspired me. I never met him, and I'm in the house. You know, so it shows the power of photography and how you can influence somebody indirectly, not even knowing.
I would like to talk about how you said you like to get to know who you're photographing. And I think that's so important because you can just take a photo of someone and then just not conversate with them at all and then go about your day. But when you talk with your model, I think it's so now you have like a connection. So when you look back on that photo, you can be like, oh, I remember this and I remember their name and what they were wearing and what we talked about. And it's better than just taking their photo and then just saying, oh, thank you, and then just walking away.
Because it's
Now
like
you have history with them. Now you remember them.
right, and you don't want to take, you know, and that's a good point that you made because you just take, you know, you get so caught up just getting the image, you're missing something very vital. Again, for me, we met on this path for a reason, and I want to know why we met. What's your name? What are you doing in life? I might have met somebody who's going through a very difficult point in their life, and I'm able to give them guidance, and vice versa. So I really believe wholeheartedly that every single person I've met throughout my life, I met for a reason. And early on, it might have made sense, but today, after all these years and through social media, where I have a platform now to share these images, so many people are reaching out to me on all levels, saying to me why we met. One young woman I just reconnected with, and I just met her one time. I took a photograph of her newborn daughter, and her mate. And when she saw that picture on my Instagram feed, she broke down and cried. And then she in me and she said to me, you have no idea what that photograph means to me, because not too long afterwards, me and my baby's father fell victim to crack. and we fell victim in a really bad way. And he eventually lost his life. And I suffered tremendous PTSD behind that. That photograph represented a better time in our life, and it helped her with her healing process. And now her and I are communicating about her struggle with addiction, in hopes that she would use that experience to guide others. So I get that on my Instagram feed all the time. If those who are watching would go and study some of the photographs, it's amazing that people have given commentary that I might have only met for a few seconds. So it showed, and not only are we reconnected, but we're developing friendships in terms of understanding why we met in the first place. So for me, it's not about trying to take an image. There's certain situations where you may not get to really communicate with the person the way that you want to, but overall, I always make it an effort to at least shake your hand and engage you and give you some words of encouragement. Back in the old days, I used to always say to the younger people, to give them a sense of guidance, is that everything you do today is going to reflect upon your future. So I wanted to be a guide. It was bigger than photography with me. Yeah. I had a genuine desire to want to try to save the lives of a lot of young men. Because mind you now, people don't realize that in 1983, at the age of 23 years old, I was working in one of the largest jail systems in America. I was working on Rikers Island during the crack epidemic and when violence was at its apex, and I was seeing death and destruction on a regular. So I had to leave that environment and I had to go out, try to educate people to the horrors of incarceration, because back then, a lot of young men thought it was a rite of passage to go to jail to prove their manhood. So I had to work overtime to convince young men that that's not the place to be. So photography for me was both therapeutic, but it's also a tool, an instrument that I use to engage young people about the horrors of crack, the horrors of incarceration. So that's what it was more about. That was number one, trying to save the lives of people through the language of photography. Mm-hmm. If you can go to another photograph. It could be a black and white of despair. Because this is I was concerned about poverty. Coming back to America after being in the military, I saw how billions of dollars was wasted on warfare. But meanwhile, we live in one of the richest countries in the world, and you have poverty. And so I was drawn towards poverty. My father thought that it was like he didn't understand that, but I was just empathetic about what I was seeing in the street. And here you have an older gentleman that looks fearful, and it could be today, but this is back then. We could go to the next frame, please.
Oh, yeah.
And this is a very interesting photograph. I was in a Dunkin' Donuts, and I was looking out the window, and there was a woman below me, and I actually photographed about 30 people walking by her. And it was all these different people just walking by this one woman. And what the amazing photograph is not necessarily this one, but it's a photograph of a homeless man putting money in her cup, who had 2 big holes in his pants. Despite the condition, as I was about to put my camera away, he came and put money into her cup. But I try to convey a message in my images. And here you have, I call this particular photograph When Two Worlds Meet. So you have a woman who's poor, and you have a woman walking by with a Gucci bag. If we could just go to one more frame, please. And this is just a fun shot, right? I'm on a crowded street in Soho.
Oh, man.
Afternoon, and it's packed in the street. And I learned this from Leonard Fried's work. I wanted images that make a statement. Here you have a black and white Dalmatian, and you have a sign that says no dogs allowed, and he's looking sad. And I was able to capture what I would call a decisive moment. And mind you now, it's packed on the street. It's jam-packed. And that's why I say it's very important that when you travel, you keep your third eye open and you have your camera set, because you'll never know when you're going to get a shot. And I had to get the shot fast because it was packed. There was a lot of photographers around me, and I had to get it, and I had to make sure my settings were right, and I hit it, and I got it at the right moment. We just go to one more shot, and then, Mike, you can take over from that point. And this is a very important photograph to me right here. It said Veterans Day, and it's a political statement I'm making because I'm angry with the war that's going on. At this point, we have the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I call this photograph Look into the Future. And here you have this young Marine cadet with his beautiful blue uniform on, and you have these young shorties in the background looking up to this young man during a time of warfare. And more, there's a chance that some of these young men might even went into the war, because here we're going in the 20th anniversary in the war in Afghanistan. So there's a good chance that when this photograph was taken in 2004, that some of these young men might even went into war. So this is me making a political statement about we got to stop ending war. We cannot send another generation to war.
Mm-hmm. That probably leads me to my question of asking, when you started, like now looking back on all your photographs that you've taken over the years, going back to like your first ever image, did you ever find yourself and think like, oh, this is what I want to do? Or did you ever think that this is how far you would come with taking photos and how it would impact people?
Wow. That's such a great question. Let me see if I can do something. Hold on one second. Let me just try to do this really quickly, if it works. All right. So I never, when I picked up the camera and just started kind of like experimenting and shooting, I never really gave a whole lot of thought to what it was, what it could actually lead to. Um, it was just right at that point for me. It was kind of like medicine. I had spent 20 years, roughly about 20 years working in the financial world, and in that world, it's high stress. You're stressed out. You're working for these companies. You're handling millions and sometimes billions of dollars in terms of transactions, and it kind of leads to burnout. And what I didn't realize was I was a creative. When I was contemplating going back to school, and I was like, well, I guess I better go back to school and kind of get an MBA or something like that, so that I could actually do something that would be a little more, that I could kind of grow in that business and go to the next level. But was that really what I wanted to do? Well, I went to the school and I talked with a guidance counselor, and the guidance counselor, after asking me a number of questions, she came back to me and she said, you may not realize it, but you're actually killing yourself. And I couldn't understand what she said when she meant that. She said that you need to have a creative outlet. You need to be doing something creatively, and if you're not doing that, it's gonna affect you down the line. So when this photography came, it kind of made sense. I finally felt something that I had a release, and I was able to get like all of this creative energy out. And let me see if I can share this picture with you. It wasn't in the slides, so that's why I had to go this route to get it right here. So fast forward, I start taking pictures, and I'm kind of like I'm getting better with it. Can you see that picture?
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, nice.
So fast forward, I start taking pictures, and it starts to actually lead me some places. My wife said, your pictures are getting kind of good. So she went past this place on Cortlandt Street here in the Bronx, and we didn't know. She said it's a cool little gallery spot. Maybe you could talk to them about maybe like doing a show or being a part of a show. Well, as it turns out, I went over and it was the Bronx Documentary Center. And I was like, what is this?
Wow.
But it was this organization that was formed in this community to bring photography and open up that medium to the community, a community that is usually neglected in those areas, especially in the areas of the arts. It was a doorway for me to like a community of like-minded individuals. We were all photographers or aspiring photographers. And once I got in there, I started like participating, like volunteering, and then going to their Friday night classes where we would critique each other's work. So this image, they announced that they were having a show, and it was called Bronx by Bronx. So a bunch of Bronx photographers were all going to just be contributing work. So I ended up contributing this and two other images, and this image got picked by an editor from the New York Times by the name of Sandra Stevenson to be the postcard invitation for that show.
Mhm.
That picture also went on to sell to the artist that Jamel had talked about, Laura James. She bought this picture from me.
Wow.
She put me in a directory in the Bronx of a bunch of all the Bronx artists that are currently residing here. And then she ended up putting me in a show alongside with the work of Jamel Shabazz. And that goes back to answering the question in terms of I never knew that what I was trying to do as a creative release was going to lead me down this path, which goes back to what Jamel says in terms of there's a reason why we do what we do and why we cross paths with individuals. Even you, Giovanni, it's no accident that you're here in this room learning from the two of us, because it's going to affect your journey and you're going to have an impact on other people's lives as well. And for me, it all started with this image right here. This image was a doorway and a gateway for me that it propelled me into a whole nother, like I never would have even thought that I would have been able to leave out of the financial world. And yeah, I do have to go back and forth from time to time because photography is not it's not the easiest. Jim Estrin at the New York Times said, if you want to get rich, don't try to think that it's going to happen from photography. People who do photography do it because they love it. And that is what it's about for me. I have a love for it, a passion, and a desire to create imagery that people connect with. And so, yeah, to answer your question, I never would have thought that it would have led to where it's led up to this point. And I don't know where it's going to go from here, but I'm all in because, I'll never stop shooting. It doesn't matter in terms of like the amount of followers, the amount of likes in the comments, because I shoot because it's inside of me and it's what I love to do. And I love connecting with people and I love inspiring people. And that is the motivation for doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, I share the same feelings. And if I look at it early on, that I would have never have imagined I would get answers to so many questions that I had. Because again, growing up in the 1960s during the war in Vietnam and the civil rights movement, I needed to find answers to these images that stayed in my mind. So I would never have imagined I would connect with Vietnam veterans who served in the war now 20, 30 years later, who explained it to me, in addition to connecting with people who had participated in the civil rights movement, and now they're giving me insight into the images I saw back in that day and time. So for me, a lot of it was a part of a journey, a visual diary of my life. And then as I start to better understand my purpose in life or my assignment, I realized that my goal was to pave the way for the next generation of creative artists. So now they have someone that they can kind of like look at for guidance, in addition to my strong desire to making sure that this work is preserved in institutions and museums are higher learning for the next generation. Because it wasn't about me. I look at having the ability to see as a divine gift. I think about those who are blind, who cannot see. So by me having this divine gift of vision, I feel a sense of obligation to give back to my creator by bringing some type of joy in life, trying to use my work as a form of visual medicine in a time that we need medicine and we need to heal.
Well, I think that both of you are very inspiring, and that anyone that looks at your work is probably going to take a lot away from what you guys have to say and what you photograph. So I thank you for sharing your work.
Appreciate that.
Very inspiring.
As you can see, I've brought myself back in, and as you folks have been seeing the comments that we've been getting This was a great panel. Thank you so much. And Gia, I know we just have to wait a few years to start seeing your output.
I can't
And it's gonna, I mean, you know, we should just set the timer right now and just see what's gonna happen as you start building up your own set of photos. And the Jamel and Michael, thank you so much for coming here. It's really was something else to see this. And we got more coming. You folks can stay. I'm going to end the broadcast in just a minute, but the three of you, please stay. You can all then say your farewells, you know, gradually. But for everyone else, I'm going to cut the broadcast right now. Thank you all for your questions. Don't forget, this is a fundraiser. We're trying to raise money for the Art and Design High School that Gia goes to. All the money goes to getting photography equipment, video equipment, art kits, all sorts of things, graduation. It's on and on and on. So thank you so much, everyone, and we'll see you on the other stream.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. Please, again, thank your mom for inviting me. Thank you all for just. It's just been an incredible experience for me, and I'm just grateful again just to be able to be a part of it with my brother Jamel.
And I extend my sincere thanks and gratitude to you, Michael, and Giovanni, and Miguel, and the PTA, the student body, the listeners. We live in a very critical time right now. Let us use our creative gifts to try to make this world a better place. We're dealing with war, we're dealing with poverty, we're dealing with depression, we're dealing with suicide, we're dealing with homelessness, despair, so much. As artists, we have the ability to make the world a better place. So let us use our God ability to try to bring some joy in this very tough world. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Take care, everyone.
All right.
So here we are. We're going to do a quick little, again, just a little slideshow and discuss why we're doing what we're doing. So I'll get it started. And
it's been such an amazing weekend. The professionals that we've met through Fanfare have been extraordinary. They gave their time, and they made it possible to interact with our amazing students. This is a fundraiser, though. And so we really want to make sure that people who have enjoyed this content all weekend are really going through and making a donation to help our students. Our students are the best of the best. They are from every part of New York City, from the Bronx to Staten Island to Brooklyn, Queens, and they come to school in the heart of Manhattan. And they need our help. They need our help to get art supplies. That's a big, need that you don't think about. Everyone is not working digitally. And if they are working digitally, they need the next Wacom tablet, or they need the next application. And that's what the PTA funding can give to them. Oh, there's John. Hi, John.
Hello.
Hey, John.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Okay.
I'm so excited you were having a great time with the cosplayers.
Oh, they were so much fun. We could have talked for another 2 hours. It would have been great.
And what was great too was one of those cosplayers was an alumni, and she was talking about how much the school meant to her and her ambitions. She is now a working illustrator working with Nickelodeon on a project, I think, also working
Netflix.
Netflix. Thank you.
Yep.
And so that's the kind of student, these ambitious students who want to work in the creative field. This is a great slide showing some items and what you can provide if you can donate today. A studio easel is something that any artist who works on canvas can use.
The illustration folks,
that is expensive, and we would love to be able to provide that. And so could you make a donation today of $125?
We have our guests here are going to be talking about comics, and there's India ink, this special, the pens, there are all these little accoutrements that they all need in order to get the job done. So,
and you don't buy it once. You buy the easel once, but ink, paint, paper, you go through it. If you're in school and you have to be constantly creating, you're going through it. And so it's a constant need. And we want to be there for our students, the PTA.
You had a great story. I don't want you to.
Oh, yes. Well, I met with an illustrator, or it was an aspiring cartoonist, but he's in 9th grade. He's amazing. He was showing me an ink drawing, and it was this elaborate ink drawing with all this cross-hatching and everything on it. And he said, I couldn't finish it the way I wanted it to because I ran out of ink in this ink pen, which was like a special ink pen. And I just thought, wow, if that isn't a metaphor for what we're doing, you know, like, let's keep that ink flowing. Let's let him realize the beautiful creation he was making, and let him be, you know, the next cartooning star. And you can do it.
Yeah. Like as we were saying, even $1 helps. So anything helps. John, this is here. We rack this up. It's time for that radio voice.
Yeah, here we go, guys. If you can, please donate to fanfarenyc.com, or you can go and donate through a text message, because we're super savvy like that. You can text FFNYC to 44-321. Give us all the money, everything you got in your wallet. Go through your kids' piggy banks. They don't need it yet. When they go to the High School of Art and Design, then they can save up. But for now, you know, give us what you got.
Yes. Go ahead.
I think there was one more slide that we were going to just talk about, merchandise, because John had a T-shirt on that was very special the last few days. I think you had to wear it. You had to wash it. Now I understand.
That's funny. I actually did. I was like, I can't do it.
It was like the smellometer. There was no, you couldn't do it. But
2 days I had it.
But we know people are such fans of Fanfare, and we have some merchandise with our mascot on it, which was created by one of our students, Lang Mansunu. And I just want to make sure that everyone who wants to could buy it. It's on our website, fanfarenyc.com, and go there, buy whatever. They're great. I have a T-shirt. I'm excited. My daughter has a sweatshirt.
There's the mascot up in the top right.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
So the all this merchandise is available through tomorrow, but then it's not available. So please do go and get yours today.
There's a gate. You gotta get there before the gate closes. And
exactly.
then we do want. It's still, if you go and you donate, certain amounts get you some of these merchandise too. Am I not right? I'm sorry.
No, you're right. You're right. I think it is. If you donate $125, we will give you one of these awesome tote bags. We also have little limited edition button packs. If you donate $50, we will give you a limited edition button pack. We don't have this pictured because it's not for sale. That's a special gift just for our friends who donate more than $50.
And if you donate $1,000, Joanne, myself, and Miguel will come to your house.
Oh, I thought you were going to throw in that dog.
Yeah,
and the dog.
And the dog.
We're just giving stuff away.
Right.
Time, bodies.
We'll do it. I'll get on the call and talk to you. Talk you through that, writing that $1,000 check or making that donation. But
one more zero.
thank you.
One more zero.
That's right. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Thanks.